Deleted session, May 5, 1981. Now, it is sometimes difficult to explain certain issues so that you do not end up with a simple black or white explanation. Everything I have said about the sinful self applies. The sinful self is not the villain. It is not a case of one portion of the personality inflicting difficulties on other portions so much as you have a pattern of reactions to various forces in the personality, which to some extent end up serving certain purposes. There may be very unpleasant side effects. Illnesses are in their way inadequate methods of solving problems. Ruber had strong elements of personality still caught up in the beliefs of what I have called the sinful self. At the same time, for many reasons, he had the idea that he was expected to be not merely a well-adapted natural person, but a kind of super self, solving other people's problems, being a public personality, a psychic performer, and so forth. There was a vast gulf between those two extremes, one that was bound to cause strain and effort and misunderstandings. The entire sinful self syndrome should remind him of his own personal background, so that he can see the growth of his personality. For in the large, he has of course grown out of that framework. If he had not, he would not have done any of his creative work, and in the light of his background, his achievements become even more outstanding. The symptoms are the result of the strain between the still lingering beliefs from childhood, clashing with the unrealistic goals of being a kind of super self. For in the light of that kind of super self-image, so much is expected that almost any achievement is taken for granted. It almost dissolves in the imagined light of super-expected performance. This generates a sense of disapproval, of course. It also tends to being about a bigger division between those two images of the self. We want to speak more of reactions between elements of the personality, so I do not want you to settle upon one portion as the villain. At the same time, I do not want to play down the unfortunate aspects of the beliefs connected with the sinful self. Those aspects are at the psychological core of your civilization and at the very heart of your organizations, whatever they are. To some extent, Ruber's panic is also the result of trying to live up to an impossible image, while forgetting his own personal background, and by expecting himself to behave as if that background was unimportant. He was a person taught to believe that expression was somehow wrong. Despite that he became an excellent writer, he uses expression constantly. He expected himself to be a public personality. That is, he felt the responsibility to be one, as if that had always been a goal, when of course it had not been. He had been shy with people, shy about reading his own poetry, though determined to do so. Yet he felt that he should become this public personality, or to perform. I keep trying to think of examples so that you know what I mean. The entire idea of responsibility has been overstrained. The creative work was expected not only to be creative, imaginative, intuitive, to contain the highest elements of conceptual thought, but must also be capable of solving the most concrete physical problem, tuned with some magical tuning fork so that it could serve almost any purpose required of it. The symptoms were the result of strain placed upon the personality by the conflicting pools of various beliefs, beliefs that did not fit the basic natural make-up of his personality or temperament. He was also expected to be an excellent businesswoman, a fine artist, An extroverted personality to shine in any company, an introvert capable of greater spiritual exertion. He expected too much of himself. At the same time, of course, to some extent he blocked his own natural motion, which followed directly from his own motivations and abilities, his own desires and instincts. He may not want to be a public personality, but he does enjoy expression. He does enjoy his own brand of teaching. Part of all this is due to the original aspect of your work itself, which does not have any well-defined definitions. You have always been do-it-yourselfers, so your strengths and weaknesses become quite noticeable. Who can say when determination ends up in stubbornness? Robert has been facing the feelings of panic, however, that he had buried. They may not be pleasant, but they are expressions, often enough of valid enough questions and fears that were overlooked or proved as insignificant or foolish. In the light of this super self-image, who was expected to have no doubts, no fears, only flawless performance. Robert felt that fears were beneath him, or should be beneath him. He felt that you also expected him to cast aside such feelings, partly if they did not correspond with your own. This is a time of clearing the board. You live physically in present time, so it is the body that takes the brunt of such difficulty. It always tries to right itself, but it must also work within the effective overall pattern of beliefs and expectations. The panic is dissipating through varying stages of expression. Expressions of love and support on your part are invaluable, so that Robert understands that you love him for the person that he is, not for some better self that he should be. He is beginning to move ahead again, creatively, which will also be physically reflected. The two are related. The present situation has been bound to result in more concentration upon the problem than usual, but in this particular instance, the overall results become constructive, because they result in the psychological motion of the released feelings of panic. The experiences he had of better imagined working, for example, are important indications of inner resolutions, and that the body is making progress. The panic kept him from trusting his body, and as that dissipates, his innate trust in his body and his own capacities will improve, and his performance, of course. The suggestion I gave about his situation is important in that regard. That is enough for this evening. Generally speaking, however, both the physical discomfort and the panic have passed their intense periods. The idea of responsibility has hampered him. The panic in the morning episodes will also begin to pass, but they are also caused by the feeling of not being able to measure up, no matter what one does, and the obsession. He has begun, generally now, to feel more energy, and that will continue, and the obsession, unless you have an important question. Ross said, only about that discussion we had yesterday, about the power of the sinful self to cause such physical reactions. They said, I tried to answer that question this evening. Ross said, okay. They said, I found good evening. Ross said, thank you. They said, a note to Frank Longwell. By the time that all in all he is handling the events of his life well at this time, it will help if he trusts that such is the case, so that self-doubts are minimized. It will also help if he remembers what he likes to do and enjoys doing, as opposed to what he thinks he should do in the line of business and obsession. Ross said good night. They said, you are being carried through this period, by the way, You are being protected for this period. It will help the two of you to remember that.